In the last section, we created a new project folder. We're now going to play around with the language a little bit and get a better sense of some of the fundamental features of the language. We'll also get a better sense of what the VS Code editor does to help us write more effective code. So inside of our main function, I want to set a very easy goal for us right now. I want to say that I want to create a new variable inside of here. I want to create a new variable and I want to assign it a string that represents a playing card. I want to then use that FMT package to print out that string, just essentially like we did in our previous project. So let's walk through our code, or let's just kind of write it out, and then we'll talk about exactly what we're doing. So inside of our main function, I'm going to start off by creating a new variable and assigning a value to it. Now the first way we're going to write out this variable, the first way we're going to do this assignment is going to result in a little warning message. So you might see a little warning pop up here. But that warning is totally fine. We'll talk about why we are seeing it in just a second. So I'm going to say var card, then I'm going to say string equals ace of spades, like so. And then immediately underneath it, I'm going to print out the card variable that we just created. So I'll say fmt.println and then pass in that card. Now, something interesting I want to show you. Before we even start to dive into the syntax here, I'm going to save this file really quick. And when I do so, you'll notice that this import statement right here was automatically added for me. And so that's a little feature of VS Code. VS Code recognized that we were trying to make use of the FMT package. And so it automatically added an import statement for it at the top of the file. So this is just one of the very many fancy little pieces of integration that VS Code has for us. Now let's break down this statement right here where we said var card string equals ace of spades. This line right here declares and assigns a value to a variable that we refer to as card. Now like I said, you'll see this green squiggly line right here, and if we hover over it, it gives us this warning message that says should omit string type blah blah blah. Again, let's just kind of forget that message for just a second. Instead, let's break down the whole syntax of this line right here and get a better sense of what it's doing. Okay, so here we go. So this is the line that we just added in. I've broken it down by every single word. The first word in here, a var, is short for variable. It informs Go that we are about to create a new variable. Right after the word var, we then declare the name of the variable. And I said here this is going to be greeting. That's not correct. It's going to be card. So we are making a new variable called card. Now these first two words here, no matter what programming language you're coming from, probably look 100% reasonable. What's starting to look a little bit stranger is the third word of string. The word string right here is telling the Go compiler that only a value of type string will ever be assigned to this variable. Then on the other side of the equal sign, we create a new string. It contains the value ace of spades, and that gets assigned to the value, or to the variable card right here. So at this point, I want to take a minute to talk a little bit more about why we put the word string right here. So I'm going to pull up another diagram. Okay, here we go. Go is what we refer to as a statically typed language. Statically typed languages might feel a little bit different to you if you're coming from the world of JavaScript, Ruby, or Python. JavaScript, Ruby, and Python are all examples of dynamically typed languages. A dynamically typed language is one in which you and I, the developers, essentially do not care what values we are assigning to any given variable. So for example, I'm going to pop open my Chrome console right here, which is going to allow me to just very quickly write out a little bit of JavaScript. Now I want to show you an example of something. I'm going to say var number equals 123. And then immediately underneath that, I'm going to say number equals ABCD inside of a string like so. And so now if I print out number, I get the string ABCD. So this is an example of a dynamically typed language, a perfect example of it, I would say. With JavaScript, the interpreter does not care if we define a variable and assign it an integer, and then later on assign it a string, which is what we're doing right here. With languages like Java, C++, or especially in our case with Go right here, doing such an operation would throw a real big error message. With Go, whenever we define a variable, we assign it a type. So we might say, just like in the code that we saw inside of our editor, the variable card is always going to contain a string. It's never going to contain a number. It's never going to contain an object or any other type of data. It's always 100% of the time going to contain a string. Now Go has a lot of different basic data types available to it. So these are some of the very basic types that are available to us. So we just made use of a string, which is essentially a sequence of characters. We also have access to a bool, which is short for Boolean. So that would be like a true or false value. We have access to type int, which is an integer, which might be like 0, 9,000, whatever else. And then we also have access to a float 64, which you can think of as essentially being a number with a decimal after it. Now this is not by any means an exhaustive list of basic types right here. There are many other different types available to us inside of Go, but these are some of the ones that we're going to be using most frequently throughout this course. Again, one thing I want to highlight is that these are some of the basic or very fundamental types that are available to us. There are other types of data that are much more complex, but you can think of these as being the very fundamental, like root in the earth sort of types inside the language. Now let's flip back over to our code editor and take a look at our statement right here again, a var card string. So again, by putting in the word string right here, we are informing Go that only a string will ever be assigned to the variable of card. But as we saw, it looks like there's a little bit of a warning message here. It says, should omit type string from declaration of var card. And then specifically it says it will be inferred from the right-hand side. So like I said, this is one way of defining a new variable inside of Go. This is kind of like a very long form method. It says very explicitly what we are attempting to do. The reason that we are seeing this error message here is that Go is thinking, hey, you know what? Based on the code that you wrote here, you don't really have to write out the word string. I can kind of figure out what you're trying to do with card here, so you don't have to write out string. So an alternative way of writing out this line of code, and I'm going to comment that out, an alternative way of writing out that line of code would be to simply say card equals and then ace of spades. Now these two lines of code right here are 100% equivalent. They both define a variable called card, and then they both inform Go that the card variable is going to contain some data of type string. In the second case right here, we are relying upon the Go compiler to just kind of figure out that card is supposed to contain a string. It does that by reading in this equals operator right here. So this is essentially telling Go, hey, we want to make a variable card called card, and you need to figure out what type of data is going to be assigned to it. And so if you're used to using languages like C++ or Java, and you're kind of tired of typing out the very specific type of every variable, Go is kind of nice because it will infer types to a degree for you. Now, one thing I want to point out here, this is a very common error that I guarantee you're going to make all the time as you get started. We only use this equals syntax when we are defining a new variable. If we are reassigning an existing variable a new value, we do not have to use the equals anymore. So for example, if we define card to be equal to ace of spades right here, and then we very shortly after decide, well, you know what, I think the card should actually contain the 5 of diamonds, we would say card equals 5 of diamonds. So notice that I did not use a colon in this case. So we only have to use the colon when we very first initialize the value. So this is the initialization statement right here. The variable has been created. But after that, we no longer have to do the initialization. We can just assign a new value to card. Now to just do a little bit of code quality check, I'm going to save this file by hitting Command S. It looks like all the error messages and warnings go away. You can see something kind of interesting here. And again, this is a warning you're going to see several times as you start writing code. So if I did mistakenly, accidentally, if I put in card equals again right here, and then save the file again, I'm going to see an error message pop up. And so it says, hey, that's not a new variable. You put in equals to kind of indicate that this is going to be a new variable, but that's not a new variable. You already declared that previously. And so the compiler is essentially telling us, drop off that colon. you're just trying to do an assignment. Okay, so that looks much better. All right, in this section, we spoke a little bit about how we do variable declaration with Go. We have this very long form available to us right here, where we say var card, we specify the type that it is, and then assign it a value. And then we can also use this abbreviated syntax where we say simply the name of the variable, colon equals, and then the value that we want to assign it. We can then assign new values to an existing variable by simply saying the variable name equals, and then whatever we are trying to assign to it. Now let's take a quick break, and we'll continue in the next section and talk a little bit more about the basics of Go.